what is happening in his life and where he's at. And he's kind of in the middle of flying from Mexico to Romania right now, and he just had a little short Texas detour. So he's going to be sharing with you today. So you guys give a warm welcome to Jacob Stacy.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks, guys. You did great. Way to go. Can we give the band another hand? Come on. Come on. These guys are awesome. If you don't know me, if you are newer to Byers Assembly, my name is Jacob Stacy. It's so great to meet you. I'd love to talk to you after service. I'll be around, so just come find me. So I was on staff here at Byers Assembly for about 2 years as the Kidsmen director, and then most recently, about 3 years ago, I decided to join an organization called The Mission. So I went there as a student to learn about like international missions, how they do ministry in foreign countries and that kind of thing. So I went there as a student for a 3-year program. You kind of sign up year by year, but I went for all 3 years of the program. I just finished that up, and now I have started a job for the organization. So I am going to Romania to start that. So that's super exciting, really excited about that. And God's done some awesome things along the way, taught me some really cool things along the way, and that's a little bit about what I want to share this morning. I want to share with you guys some of the things that I have learned over the last couple of years, and some things that have just been highlighted to me in the recent last couple of months. So we're going to jump in really quick just by reading a verse out of 1 Peter, 2 verses. It's 1 Peter 4, 10 through 11 if you've got your Bible. Also, I know we like to say this around here, note takers are world changers. That's all I'm saying. So if you want to take notes, that's awesome. Marty's got his notes. I see him. Awesome. So we're going to jump in and read this verse. 1 Peter 4, 10 and 11, it says this: As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another, as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks, as one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves, as one that serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him belong glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. So let's pray really quick, and then we'll jump in. Jesus, I just pray that you would just help all of us, even myself, to pull something new out of the words that you've given us for this morning. Help us to open our hearts and our minds into learning a little bit more about you, into taking that one step a little bit closer to knowing who you are, to getting to know you better, to getting to know ourselves better and the way that we see you. Just help us to get to know you better and just get that one step closer this morning. Amen. So the verse I want to focus on in that is verse number 10. It says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So we're talking a little bit about like stewardship, like taking care of the things that God gave you, the talents, the abilities, the physical things that you have around you. I want to talk a little bit about stewarding those things this morning. And so one of the things I love about God is how personal he is. Like the fact that I know that we, in Christian culture, we talk a lot about how God has a specific plan for your life. And he has this really clear path that he wants you to take. And he's going to show you that. And he's going to reveal you those things along the way. And that's so true. But I think the thing even cooler than that is that each of us, inside of us, have something different than each person sitting next to us or in this room. Each person has something to offer that not everyone has. Each of us have something to offer that not everyone has. And I just love seeing that because the thing is I love that God gives us freedom as well as he gives us these things and entrusts us with them. Right? Because you could be really good at something. You could be really good at cutting hair like Jason. I don't know. And he could use that just to make money. He could literally just take that and do whatever he wanted to with that ability. Or, as we can see in the Bible, we can see that people use these talents and they use the things that God has given them to invest into others, to invest into other people. And because of that, they live a fuller and a richer life just because they chose to use the things that God gave them in the way that he wants them to use them. And again, this isn't a mandate. Like God doesn't say, like, I'm giving you this thing as long as you use it in this way. And then if you use it in this way, then you can keep it. If not, I'm going to take it away. He doesn't say that. He gives you these things, and he says, I trust you. Go forward and use them however you see fit. That's what he does, and that's so cool. So my big question for today, kind of the question I want to focus around, is what do you have in your hands? What do you have in your hands? If you're taking notes, you're going to want to write that down. I'm going to say it a lot of times today. We're going to talk about it a lot. What do you have in your hands? And what I mean by that is, what do you have readily available to yourself? What do you have around you? What do you have close to you that you can use to invest into other people? What is something specific to yourself that God has given you that maybe not everyone has, that you can use in a way to honor God? What are those things? What do you have in your hands? 1 Peter reminds us, that verse we just read, it tells us everyone has something special. Everyone has a gift. All of us have received a gift that we can use to serve others. That's the purpose of these gifts, these blessings that God has put in our life. It's not so that we can hold it and be like, wow, I'm so awesome. It's so that we can give it out and we can use it to invest into other people. So each of us has something specific. Note takers, you might want to write this down. That's why it's on the screen. Each of us has something specific inside of ourselves that no one else has. God created each of us for a unique purpose. Each of us has something specific inside of ourselves that no one else has. So you might not be like as good of an organizer as Jessica. I am not. Raise your hand if you can organize things. There you go. I'm right. I raised my hand, but I shouldn't have. Raise your hand if you can cut hair like Jason cuts hair. Not me again. We got one. So a couple of you. See, I can't do either of those things, but what 1 Peter tells me is that I have abilities and I have gifts that they don't have. And the cool thing is it's not about like a comparison like, oh, my gift is cooler than your gift, or I have this thing that you don't have, that's so awesome. But it's more about learning what you can do with what you have been blessed with. It's about learning what you can do with the things that God gave you. How can you use the things that you have, not what someone else has? How can you use the things that you have to invest in other people? So again, what do you have in your hands? We're just gonna keep hitting that question. What do you have in your hands? What do you have readily available to you that you can use? And so I know Kickoff Sunday is today. Today is the day that we celebrate going back into school. Kids, who's ready for school? There's a few of us saying, nobody? Nobody's ready for school? Come on, well, you're a parent. I mean, you should be excited for school. Come on. But so Kickoff Sunday is here, and that's amazing. I love getting back into the school year, kind of helping people get back into a good routine. Football season starts. Come on, that's always a good thing. And so all those things are great. None of them are bad things, but it's really easy in a season like this to become distracted, to kind of lose your focus, lose the things that you had been working on over the summer, maybe when you had a little more time. It's easy to lose focus on those things when we're involved in a lot of things. And again, listen, guys, if I could stay here and be a part of one more football game, I'd miss my flight pretty easily. I would pretty easily miss my flight and be a part of one more football game. So these things aren't bad. That's not what I'm saying. But what I want to express is that it's so easy to get distracted when our lives get busy and to forget our purpose, to forget what we're doing, to forget that, like, as a church, as a community, our mission is to know Jesus, grow together, and invest in others. It's so easy to forget those things. Like, I forget them as a person who literally goes to another country to tell people about Jesus. Like, that's literally what my life is doing right now, and I forget this. Like, it's so easy to get distracted and forget that our purpose is to know Jesus, grow together, and invest in others. So my challenge for you this morning is to look around at the things that you have, look around at what God has given you specifically, and figure out how to do those three things with what you have. How can you know Jesus better with what you have? How can you grow together with people with what you have? How can you invest in others with what you have available to you? That's my challenge. And so this morning, just kind of the main part of my message, I didn't want to focus on like any one scripture in particular, but I just wanted to share a few stories, things that I have like learned and been focusing on over the last couple of years, and just share some testimonies of people who have gone before me and inspired me in doing these things, who have inspired me to find what I have in my hands and how to use those things. I love how Aaron and Jessica were talking about the Bible this morning, how they were talking about like the power of God's word and the power of reading these stories of people who have gone before us and people who have like walked the life before us, and they have, some of them made good decisions, some of them made bad decisions, but learning from their mistakes, learning from the good things that they did, and ultimately, like learning from their life, learning what they did. I really love that. I think it's so important, like in our lives, to share testimonies. And by testimonies, I don't mean like the story of how you met Jesus. That's not what I'm talking about. Testimonies, I'm meaning like the things that God has done in you and through you in your life. The things that God has done in you and through you in your life. Sharing those testimonies. I think it's so important because just like reading the Bible, with people's stories around us also, we can use those testimonies and we can grab hold of those things and we can lean on the faith of people who have gone before us. And we can say, if God did it for them, he can do it for me. If God did it for them, he could do it for me. So one of my favorite stories from the Bible, someone who I think was just a really good steward of what he had, is Joseph. So we're going to talk about Joseph for just a second. Backstory of Joseph, if you don't know his story, basically, he was this guy, he had a couple brothers, he had some crazy God dreams in the beginning of his life, some big promises that God basically told him, you're going to be a leader, you're going to be an amazing person, and he decided to share those dreams with his brothers, and they weren't super thrilled. Anybody ever had a sibling that was like, I'm going to be cooler than you? They didn't really like it. Gotcha, Jeremy. Sorry, buddy. We'll talk later. No. So yeah, he told these dreams to his brothers, and they got really mad at him. They did not like him at all, and so they sold Joseph as a slave. They wanted to get rid of him. I didn't sell Jeremy as a slave. But they sold him as a slave, and basically he got sent into Egypt, this completely different place, and he was sold to a guy named Potiphar. And he became a slave for this guy. And so as he started working there, Joseph kind of was faced with this decision, right? He was faced with like, okay, I'm obviously in a terrible situation. Literally, my own brothers sold me. How many of you guys have ever been like, life just really like dealt me a crap hand? Right? Yeah, you've been in that place? Come on. So he was in this crappy situation, this really horrible situation, and so he had a choice to either like sit and wallow in what he had and just be like, well, I guess my luck just ran out. I guess God's promises aren't going to happen. Or he could choose to keep going and keep trusting in the promises that God had given him and walk into whatever situation he was presented with, whatever he had in his hands, whatever was in front of him, and do it to the best of his abilities and trust that God still had a plan, that God still had a plan for what he was doing, even though everything around him, everything that was in his hands seemed bad. Literally went from a son of a great man to a slave in a place he had no idea about. And so Genesis 39:4 says this. It says, Joseph found favor in his sight, talking about Potiphar. He found favor in Potiphar's sight and attended him. He made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all he had. Verse 5 says, from the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. So because of Joseph's faithfulness, because he chose not to worry about the situation that life had put him in, because of that, he went a completely different direction than I think most of us probably would have, than I would have gone, because he chose he chose to lean in to God's promises and not focus on how terrible the things in his hand looked. On how he could, because how many of you guys think it would have been so easy for him just to say in that moment, now I don't have anything. I guess I screwed that up. Shouldn't have told the dream, and now that's over. But see, what happened is he leaned into God's faith, into God's promises, and into his faithfulness. And because of that, it literally says that everything that Potiphar owned, this person who literally owned him, he gave him charge of everything he owned in his entire estate. And it says because of Joseph and because of the way that he lived, the entire place was blessed. It was just like flourishing beyond belief. To where this man literally put him in charge of everything that he had. And then what happens after that, Potiphar's wife tells a lie about Joseph, gets him sent to prison because she didn't like him. She didn't like something he did. And so she tells a lie, and then gets Joseph sent to prison. And so again, he goes from this oh man, I'm in this really terrible place, and then God has brought me up, and I've been faithful, and then he literally gets shot back down again. He gets shot back down in a very similar place. Now he's literally a prisoner. He gets shot back down in a very similar place. But Joseph did the same thing again, even though what was in his hands didn't look great. It didn't look good. He used what he had. And then the Bible literally tells us that Genesis says, whatever he did, it was blessed. Everything that he did was blessed because he chose to take what was in his hands, to go forward with it, and to trust God. And that's what he did. He took what was in his hands and he invested it in the place he was in. And then it says before long, even in the prison guards didn't even pay attention to him. That's what Genesis says. It says the prison guards didn't pay attention to him. They just kind of let him do his own thing because everything that he did was great. Even in prison. Pretty crazy. So we can read stories like that out of the Bible all the time, and I love the story of Joseph. But a couple of these, kind of like what I was telling you, I love to share testimonies that I've heard from other people as well. Because again, just like the Bible, I think that we can take stories from people around us who have gone before us and lean into that faith as well. So I want to tell you a story about a couple of people called Jimmy and Gina. They run the mission. They run the organization that I work with. I've gotten to get pretty close with them over the last couple of years, which is really cool. And so they told this story that I want to share with you because it's been a big part of my life and a big thing that I've been leaning into. So they have been running our organization for a little over 15 years now. And about 10 years ago, they were on our campus in Mexico. I think this is before we even had the campus in Romania. So they're on the campus in Mexico. And the problem that faced them was that we were running out of water. How many of you guys have ever heard something bad about Mexico water? Yeah, don't drink it. It's not a good idea. Haven't done it yet. But it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. And so on our campus, at this time, we didn't even have city water coming to our campus. They had a well on the campus that they had hand dug, by the way. That's pretty crazy. A 60-foot well they hand dug. I don't know how that happened, especially in Mexico if you've ever tried to dig there. So they had this well, and it was running out of water. And so someone on their team comes up to them, and he says, hey, listen, guys, I was looking at the well. It has stopped producing water. It is not producing any more water. And it looks like we have about a week, maybe 2 weeks of water left to supply to our campus. After that, we're going to be dry. Like we don't have any more ways to get water. So we got to figure out a solution. And so they were thinking about it, praying about it, and then they came together in another meeting. And Gina said this. She said, okay, here's what I think we should do. What we're going to do, we're going to get a big truck with like one of those big water tanks on the back of it. We're going to fill the truck up, and then we're going to start water ministry. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill that truck up. We're going to drive it out into the communities where people have no water already, and we're going to start filling up people's water tanks and things like that for their houses, and we're going to give water away so that people in our community have safe water to drink. And, the guy kind of looked at her, and he was like, Maybe she's not understanding. Maybe she does. Okay. He was like, okay, so Gina, here's the problem. The problem is that we don't have water. Like, do you understand that? Like, we don't have water. That's the whole reason we're having this meeting. And she was like, yeah, I know. I know. But what we want to do, what I want to do, what I think we should do is invest what we have, use what we have in our hands right now to invest that into other people, and I believe that God will entrust us with more. We're going to use what we have in our hands right now, and God will entrust us with more. So they started water ministry. They bought a truck, started filling it up, started going out into communities, and through that process, the well started producing water again, and it is still on our campus, providing the majority of water for our campus to this day. That was 10 years ago. And to this day, we still do water ministry. We have 3 main ministries that we do in communities. One of them is still water ministry. We still have a truck, we still fill it up, and we go talk to people, knock door to door in different communities, see if they need water, and fill up whatever they have, give them as much as they need. Like, that's so crazy. That is so, so crazy. I love that story. And another one that I heard, this is probably like the most famous story in our ministry. It's been passed down for years. So the mission, the organization that I work for, we've been around for about 36-ish years, something like that. And so our original founders, about 30 years ago, their names were Steve and Kathy. It was 30 years ago, so the orphanage was still relatively new, been around for about 5 or 6 years. And they had a shortage on food. So a little backstory on Steve and Kathy. When they started the mission, literally they just lived in Northern California, and they literally just got a call from God. They felt God telling them, I want you to go to Northern Mexico and take care of my children. That's what I want you to do. And so they sold their business, they sold their house, they sold everything they had, except for one car. They drove down to Mexico, bought a piece of land, and started living there until they could figure out how to start getting kids, how to do that. They didn't speak any Spanish, nothing. They just literally moved there off of, here's what God told me to do, and I want to be faithful with the dream that he put in my hands. And so that's what they did. So they moved down there, and then, a few years later, they're running short on food. They have a good handful, probably 20 or 30 kids on their campus, and they're short on food. So this guy on their team comes up and he says, hey, we don't have any more food. We're running out. We've got maybe a week left. We've got about a week left, and then we're going to be out of food. And he was like, and we don't have the finances to buy any more food. We don't have any money. Steve and Kathy had maxed out all of their credit cards to start this place. They were not able to even borrow any more money, let alone have money in their bank account to buy something. They maxed out all their credit cards. And so they're sitting there, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And Steve says this. He was like, okay, let's just settle down for a minute. We have a week. We have a week. He said, let's settle down. Let's go and pray about this and figure out a solution. Let's go and pray about this. Let's use the food that we have right now, what we have in our hands. Let's use that, and then we'll go from there. We'll go from there. And so a few days pass, and then they are down to about 3 days of food left for these kids. And the same guy comes up, and he's like, Steve, listen, he's like, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a way to get more money or to get more food, we need to call the government back so we can send these kids back to wherever they came from. I don't know. We're going to send them back so that they can go to a place that has food, because in 3 days, we're not going to have food for them. We can't let these kids just sit here and starve. And Steve was like, I don't think God would have sent me here. I don't think God would have sent my family here for something that he was not going to provide for. I just don't, it doesn't seem like the God that I know. He said, I don't think he would send me here if he wasn't going to provide. So he was like, let's keep using that food. We have 3 more days. Let's keep using that food, and we'll figure it out. He thought he was crazy, but he was like, okay, whatever. We'll use our 3 more days. So 2 more days pass. They're on their last day of food. The same guy comes up to him, and he says, Steve, listen. He was like, we have enough food for breakfast, and that's all we have. If the kids are still here by lunch, they will not have anything to eat. He's like, they have breakfast. So we need to call the government right now so that they can get here quick enough to get these kids somewhere where they can have lunch. He's like, we need to do that right now. And Steve said, just hold on. He was like, we're going to pray about it. We still have breakfast. We still have a little bit left in our hands. We're going to use that, and then we'll figure something out. And the guy literally, he was so angry. He just told him, he was like, you're crazy. I don't know what you're still doing here. You need to go back home to California and go, I don't know what you're going to do because you don't have any money. But he was like, you need to just get out of here. Send these kids to somewhere that can take care of them because you obviously can. You obviously can. And so Steve said, let's eat breakfast and then we'll figure it out. So they eat breakfast and they're sitting around. The campus back then was pretty small. And just to give you like a little context, the campus that we live on, now there's communities surrounding because things have built up around it. But at that time, our campus was at the end of a dirt road that was about 10 or 15 miles long. Nothing else really around. Maybe a farm or two, but there wasn't really anything around. And dirt roads in Mexico aren't quite as nice as our dirt roads. I don't know if you've ever driven on one, but they're not quite as nice. So it's a trek to get down them. So they're 10 to 15 miles down this dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. And so they're sitting, probably still arguing over like, we need to just call the people, get these kids out of here so that they don't starve in our hands. And so they're sitting there, small campus, and this big truck pulls up in front of the campus, and there's nothing going on, right? It was pretty small at the time. So literally everyone runs out, crowds around the truck to figure out, it's kind of like something interesting happening in Byers. Everybody just kind of runs out like, what's going on? What's going on, And so, right, it's just real. So everyone runs out. All the kids are out there. And Steve runs out to the truck and to see what's going on. He's like, hey, how can I help you? What's going on? And then the driver gets out. And he says this. He's like, hola, me llamo es Jeff. ¿Quieres estos gallinas? It was in Spanish, but I can translate. They were in Mexico, guys. Obviously, normally we have translators in Mexico. Anyway, so he says this. He says, hey, I work on a farm a little ways down the road, and I don't really know why, but my boss sent me here. He sent me here to see if you guys need these chickens. We have these chickens. We can't really do anything with it. Can you guys do something with these chickens? And Steve looks on the back of the truck, and there are cages of 500 live chickens. 500 live chickens in cages. And Steve's like, of course, yeah, we could use some chicken. He's from like the Bay Area. He has no idea what to do with live chickens. He's never cleaned an animal in his life, but he's like, absolutely, we will take your chickens. So they like go over to a little shed they have, and literally like probably mostly the kids, because they're the only ones that really know how to handle live animals, like are just throwing chickens into this little shed. 500 chickens. Just empty the cage, throw the chicken in, and then just close the door because they don't know what to do with them. It was amazing, right? Like God provided. But then the same guy that was talking to Steve earlier, he was like, Steve, this is so great. I am really glad that you're so excited. You got your chickens. That's awesome. He was like, but you can't just feed kids chicken. He was like, it's super great. Like it's a good start, but you can't just feed kids chicken. Like they can't just eat chicken for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Like you can't just do that. And Steve told him this. He said, well, you know what? If that didn't impress you, I can't wait to see what God does next. If that doesn't impress you, I can't wait to see what he does next. And a couple hours later, they're probably trying to figure out what to do with 500 live chickens. Another truck pulls up, again, at the end of this 10 or 15 mile dirt road. The guy was lost. He gets out, again in Spanish, I'll translate. He says this. He says, listen, I had someone cancel an order, and I can't take it back to the factory because we won't be able to like get another order this big and be able to get it out. So the bread's going to go bad. So we have to give it away today. But he said, I have 500 loaves of bread in the back of my truck that I need to get rid of. Can you guys use them? I don't really know what this place is. And Steve was like, absolutely. He was so excited, right? So God provided, literally in a morning, on the last day, they're completely out of food. God provided 500 live chickens, 500 loaves of bread for them to eat. And I really believe, we really believe that that's because Steve was faithful with the things that he had in his hand. He chose to lean into what God promised him. He said, my God would not leave me here and not provide for me when he sent me here. I know he told me this. I know this is what he promised me. He would not leave me without a way to keep this thing going. He wouldn't do it. I know him better than that. So that's pretty much the end of the story. The really fun part is getting to figuring out what to do with 500 live chickens. I've heard a couple of different things, but a couple of my friends that were in the orphanage at that time said that, like, literally Steve and Kathy had no idea. They'd never handled live. They don't hunt. They've never handled live animals or cleaned an animal. So pretty much it sounds like they let the kids clean them because they're the only ones who knew what to do with them. So I want you just to imagine 20 or 30 kids running around, like, whipping chickens' necks and cutting their heads off. One of my friends, she told me this one time. She was like, I literally thought it was a dream, but after I heard that story, I knew it was real. She was like, I thought I had a dream of chickens with no heads chasing me around the yard. I thought that was a dream. She was like, and then I got older and I heard that story, and that was real. She was like, because they just got kids walking around grabbing chicken, you got to whip their neck and cut the head off, and they still run a little bit. So she was like, I literally thought that was a dream. That's the craziest thing. That's funny. But the point is that Steve and Kathy chose to use what they had. They chose to use what God had already blessed them with, to lean into that and to just trust God, to trust what he had given them, to trust that it was actually enough to do the dreams, to follow out with the plans that he had laid before them. They trusted them with what they had, even though it didn't look like enough. So again, in your notes, in your head, whatever you want to do, ask yourself the question, what do you have in your hands? What do I have available for me? It might not look like enough. It might not look like much. It might look like something amazing. I just haven't done anything with it yet. But what do you have in your hands that you can use to serve others, that you can use to invest into others? What do you have? They're going to throw up Luke 16:10 for me. And it says this. It says, if you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in larger ones. If you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. If you're faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in the larger ones. I think we talk about this a lot with different things a common one is tithing. Oh, when I get this next raise at work, I'll start tithing because, if I make this much more, then I'll be able to give 10% to the church. Then I'll be able to trust God with this 10%. Or maybe when I get that second car, and then I kind of have like a backup, then occasionally I'll let someone borrow one of my cars, probably like the less expensive one. I'll let them borrow that because then I have a backup and I don't really have to worry about what's going to happen. Maybe when I get that next thing, then I'll be able to this. But what God says is if you're faithful in the little things, if you're faithful when you don't have much, you will be faithful in the larger ones, and he will entrust you with larger things. That's what he says. So my challenge, again, this morning, what do you have in your hands? But if you can't be faithful with what you have in your hands right now, I'm not really sure that you're going to be entrusted with things that are larger. That's what he says. He says, if you're faithful in the little, you'll be faithful with the larger things. You'll be faithful with the larger things. So I love sharing these stories of like great faith, either from the Bible or from just people that I know, or stories that I've heard of people that I really just believe God intervened in a special way. I love those stories, and they're so powerful. And I just really want to encourage you, if you have those stories, share them with the people in your circle. Share them with the people around you, because they're powerful, and they allow us to hold on to them, to hold on to those stories, and to lean into the faith of others. And in the same way, maybe if you don't have too many of those stories yet, get a Bible, we've got some, and read some of these stories, or talk to people around you who you know are more mature in the faith than you, and say, listen, I really want to trust that God's going to do this, but I've never seen it. I've just never seen it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means that you have another step to take. And so lean into these stories. Lean into the people who have gone before you. Lean into their faith. Ask questions. Ask questions about the Bible. Ask questions about the stories in the Bible. Ask questions about people's personal lives. Like, wait, hey, you faced something similar to me in the past. What did you do for this? Like, how did you get through this? What did God do in your life? Ask those kinds of questions. I have a friend here he's in Wichita, and he's just like this older guy. He has a good amount of money. He had a really good job. He's retired now, but he has this like amazing boat, like the coolest boat ever. And I don't have to own it, which is great, because I've heard that's not very fun. But he has this huge boat. He has this huge boat. And pretty much anytime I come into town, if I want to, I can call him up and say, hey, man, I've been away for a while. I really want a fun lake day. And he'll say, okay, I'm pretty much free any day. I'm retired. What day do you want to go? And he pays for all the gas. He brings his own vehicles up. Usually gives me a ride there, too, because I don't even have a car here. But he just says, okay, what day do you want to go? And he takes me. And I've done that with friends. I know he does that for other people. It's not just me. But he uses what he has. He uses what he has to invest in others. He has a sick boat, and he has a lot of time. And so he says, you know what? Why don't I use this to invest in other people? Why don't I use this to like show the love of Jesus to other people? And he does it like no one else that I know. Like just amazing. So generous, so faithful with the things that God has entrusted him with. It's so crazy. And in my own life, just like leaning into these stories has been so powerful. When I left here about 3 years ago, I had about enough money to pay for the first half of the year that I was leaving. I had enough money to get through that. And I told God, I was like, God, I feel like this is what you're calling me to do. I feel like this is what you want me to do. But I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how it's going to work because I don't have the money. And so I said, if you want me to do this, I'll do it. But you have to provide the finances. I don't have them. And so for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, I have been living without an income. And I asked for money with one video right before I left. And I've been living for 3 years with no steady income. Literally, God has used people around me, so many of you in this room, to invest into me, invest in like the promise that God gave to me. And I've lived for 3 years without an income. And that's not anything I did. That's literally due to people using what's in their hands. That's literally due to the generous people in this room and outside of this room who have chose to say, you know what, I have this, maybe I have this extra $50, and I'm going to send it. I'm going to send it over and trust that God's going to do great things with that. And honestly, where I am today, most of it is due to the people sitting in this room and the culture of this church. Honestly, I could not have done it. If it wasn't for people in this room and for other people who have invested in me, I would have came home about 3 months in and been like, well, that flopped. That was a really fun 3 months, but now I'm out of money. I'm going to move back in with my parents and figure something out. Like, that's what would have happened. That's literally what would have happened. But because of people choosing to use what was in their hands and to invest it into someone else, invest it into me, now I have a job working for an organization in 2 different countries. And that's because of people using what's in their hands. It couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened without that. And part of that for me was leaning into these stories, leaning into stories from the Bible, leaning into stories of people around me and saying, you know what, if God can provide 500 chickens, he can provide enough money for me to live for the next year. If he can provide 500 loaves of bread, then I can go have a nice meal with a couple of friends and it will be taken care of. If he can do it for them, he can do it for me. So I just want to end with asking again, what do you have in your hands? What do you have in your hands? For some of you guys, you've got extra time 1 day a week, and you can figure out something to do with that. For some of you guys, you're doing really good at work right now, and you have a little bit of extra money, and you're not sure what to do with it. It's kickoff Sunday. For some of you guys, you're about to hop on a sports team, and you have something to offer that other players on your team don't have. How can you invest that? How can you invest what God has given you back into the people around you? How can you do that? How can you use what is in your hands? Someone recently told me this. They said, the chosen are the ones who answer. The chosen are the ones who answer. So the people who are chosen for big things aren't different than other people, but they have simply decided to answer what God put in their heart and say yes. And because of that, they were chosen. Because of that, they were chosen, because of their answer. So how can we use what we have in our hands? How can we use that to invest into other people? How can we use that to know Jesus better? How can we use that to grow together? How can we use those things to go after what we know we're here to do, our purpose, our mission? How can we use what we have to accomplish those things? Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for teaching me these things over the last couple of years and giving me the words to communicate what you want us to learn this morning. And I just pray that as we leave this place today, as we go forward in our lives, show us the things that you've given us. Show us the talents, show us the abilities, show us the physical things that you've given us that we can use to invest into other people. Show us those things. Show us how we can invest back into our communities. Show us how we can invest into our community here at church. Show us what we can do with the things that you've already given us. And give us the boldness to step out and say, if you could do it for me, or if you could do it for them, then you can do it for me. Give us that boldness to step into that, to use what you have, even if it seems like just a little bit, and you're like, I don't think this $5 that I have is really going to do much for that kid in youth who's going on a youth trip that's going to cost them $500. This $5 isn't going to do anything. But choose to use what you have and trust that God, we just want to trust you that you will just multiply the things that we're using, the things that we trust you with. God, we want to be faithful in the little. We want to be faithful in the little so that we can then be faithful in the large things. God, we want to trust you with the little things so that you can trust us with the large things. Jesus, we love you. We thank you for putting these people before us, who have gone before us and who are more faithful than we are right now. Thank you for giving us those stories. Thank you so much. Allow us to have the faith and the boldness to lean into those stories. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for letting me share with you this morning. I really love being here. Honestly, probably one of the things I miss most about not living here anymore is being a part of this community. Like, it's literally one of the biggest things that I miss. So thank you so much for letting me come back for a short time and still be a part of this community. I really appreciate it. We've got a couple discussion questions. They're on the screen. So take 5 minutes. Get with the people around you and make a plan. Put the plans into action right now on how you're going to use what is in your hands. Talk to a couple people around you. Take 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes. Come on. Or you got 5 minutes in your hands, right? Come on, guys. But take 5 minutes. Talk about these things and make an action plan for this week. Before you walk out of the room, make an action plan for this week on how you're going to use what God has put in your hands to serve others. Make a plan. Awesome. Thank you guys again so much for letting me be a part of this church. I love you. I will see you soon. I leave in 2 days. Awesome. Thank you very much.